I know that the community calls you the hip-hop Republican. Recently, Jay-Z and Kanye West came out with a song. It's in Paris. and I just wanted to know, how do you feel about that word, and do you feel that it's something that is being used for profit?
It is something that's being used for profit. You know this, I know this. The question we got to ask ourselves is, do we really want to continue calling ourselves that at a time when we are the first black president? We got a black governor in Massachusetts. We have black congressmen. We had a black senator recently out of Chicago, no less. In fact, the last 3 African-American senators in the U.S. Senate were from the state of Illinois, right out of here in Chicago. Do we want to continue to perpetuate the worst in ourselves, the worst in our history, and call it a term of endearment? It's the same thing with the B and the H word. You know, do we want to continue to say that in our language, in our music? It's not a cultural thing any longer. I think that we need to stop trying to scrub it clean and excuse the bad behavior that we have. We have ghettoized our society in a lot of ways when it comes to African American culture and pride. We have learned to accept certain things that we shouldn't accept any longer, and language is powerful. What we call ourselves, how we deal with ourselves, is powerful. And it's unfortunate that 2 multi-millionaires that can be outside of the conditions that we see every day here on the south and west sides of Chicago are going to continue to perpetuate that and call that a bond. Why don't we bond with something that elevates us, not something that ties us to a very horrible and degrading past?
Wow, that's an incredible response. So, how do you feel, what do you think when, regardless of age or now income and race, you see the N-word being casually used, whether it's in school, even sometimes in church or with the family, casually?
Well, it goes back to what I'm saying. We're starting to accept a substandard within our culture, within our society, within our families, within our communities. And we're approaching a very, very dangerous point in time at this point. We have to get back to where we're not allowing the worst in ourselves to become something that's acceptable. You know, we have to address ourselves differently. We have to see something different in ourselves. Again, language is powerful. There is something that we implant within our children, within our young people. And people, you know, oftentimes don't think of a 15, 16, 17-year-old. They are still children. They don't think of them as being children. But, you know, people are generally, and the studies have shown this, people are generally adolescents until the early 20s. So what are we planting in our children's minds at 15, 16, 17 years old when we're showing them through our music, through our culture, maybe through some of our television shows, through our comedy, that this is acceptable? Entertainment's one thing, but when it starts being perpetrated throughout all aspects of our families and our communities, we have to get to a point in time where we elevate the standard and have a different type of dialogue with each other and plant a different type of seed within each other.
Okay. In a recent study with Chicago Public Schools, 1 in every 7 high school students meet the average ACT score to get accepted into college, which is like a 21. And also, about 1 in every 2 African American students in CPS graduate. So my question is CPS failing our African American students?
They're very clearly failing our African American students, and part of going back to the N-word and language, how it all ties together is this. When you go into the world, there's a certain expectation that there is to communicate, articulate vision, articulate values, articulate creativity and value. How do you articulate, how do you bring value into an organization, into a school, into a college, into a job environment, if you're not able to articulate that because you've been so bombarded with some of the lower basal natures of our language, communication, colloquialisms, and the like, you start getting pigeonholed. You start getting pigeonholed for certain types of schools, certain type of programs, certain type of jobs. You can never have economic disparities eliminated throughout the United States. You can never have the economic and social inequalities eliminated in the United States if you don't go after some of the very basic structures in our country. And that does include education, English, writing skills, language skills. How do we communicate where we are and where do we need to go? If you can't do that effectively, you cannot, more often often than not have the vision to progress from where we are to where we need to be in a very quick fashion.
I hear you speak about language quite often within this speech, within this interview. I want to know, what do you say to a teacher or a mentor or somebody within the community who's trying to reach young African American male or female who is not familiar with using standardized English? For instance, they're used to they're responsive to the B word, they're responsive to the N word. They don't know any other kind of...
But Tanner, what's their response? That's the question. What is the response? You're saying they're responsive, but if they're responding in a negative way, they're responding by shutting down, they're responding by not being emotionally open, they're responding by not being as emotionally upbeat, positive, optimistic, then yes, they're responding in a negative way. What we have to do as older people that are older in Generation X, definitely the people in Generation X, I should say, some of the older folks in Generation Y, and particularly the baby boomers as well. We have to show them the power of language. We have to provide those safe environments so that they're able to translate from what they're used to hearing in the colloquial language, what they're used to hearing in rap music, what they're used to hearing on the streets, and take it over to a new place and time. You know, it's like if you go back to the Bible and the New Testament, what did Paul say? When I was a baby, I spoke as a baby. When I was a man, I spoke as a man. It's the same exact thing now. We have to start teaching our young people how to speak and think and act as adults. And that goes back to whether Generation X and baby boomers want to start acting like leaders or they want to act like grown kids. And that's a choice that we haven't made when it comes to making the right choice. We haven't done that effectively. That's something we have to do, and there's not a price tag you can put on it. It's not a time frame you can put on it. When you love a people and you want to see a people rise up, you do what it takes for as long as it takes to allow them to cross that bridge and go over those troubled waters and rise up.